Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Scint.
And I am Axion.
And we are going to continue our journey through Johto as we play through the ROM hack of Pokemon Christmas, which has very little to actually do with Christmas.
I know, we rescued the Delibird and got all the presents back that Team Rocket stole. That's something.
Only if you really go for the most consumerist sense of Christmas, which,
Ho, ho, ho.
I mean, it actually seems kind of antithetical to a lot of the message behind A Christmas Carol, because, like, it's mentioned that, buying things for people and presents exist, but they're not at all the forefront of this, like a lot of media today seems to focus on, but that's not the topic of today's discussion, as we are continuing to discuss A Christmas Carol, but today, I believe our plan was to examine Scrooge's past.
Yep, and along the way, the ghost of Christmas past that escorts him on said journey into his own history. So, the first section of the Three Spirits begins with Scrooge lying in his bed when suddenly there is a bright light that is revealed to be the arrival of the first spirit.
Yep, and a very, very strange description given to this spirit indeed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand, not the curtains at his feet nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face was addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them, as close to it as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. Thanks, Dickens, that's not at all unsettling. You are haunted by Charles Dickens.
I don't really have a response for that.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was as white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm.
This is a depiction that's not always brought forward in all adaptations. How basically it's kind of a living candle flame in the form of a person.
Yep, and a very indeterminate age, because, as they say, it looks like a child, but it's very clearly not a child. It's more like an elderly man, but there's not a wrinkle on it.
Yep.
So, most adaptations I can think of offhand, if they're not using Jiminy Cricket, are basically leaning into the childlike aspect of the past, probably because it's the easiest to go to, where it's your past, let's go for a child, which is an odd sentence to take out of context. But, so we have long white hair, a long white tunic that basically just hangs down to, I get the impression, the knees, with like summery flowers on the shirt, and just a very bright shiny belt. So pretty simply dressed, but probably just cavernous eyes that can see forever because they are the entire past. And then there's the whole candle situation, which makes me think of Animaniacs, and I wanted to start reciting the Declaration of Independence.
Yep. Off the top of my head, the only adaptation I can think of where it actually had the flame on the head and the extinguisher cap was, of all examples, Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, where the Ghost of Christmas Past was presented as a young woman with a blue palette whose head was a flame, and she carried the extinguisher thing around like a hat, in it, like tucked under her arm most of the time she was on screen.
Which is also where the one in the book carries theirs.
Right.
Which, there's a joke there that I didn't think of, and I'm not sure if it was common parlance at the time. You know someone we meet in Scrooge's past? His old flame.
Ba-dum-bum.
I wonder if that was intentional. Like, I legitimately don't know if that was slang in the Dickensian era, or not, or if that's a more modern term. I don't know slang that well.
That might be something we would have to look into, or maybe someone in the comments can enlighten us.
If we care enough.
I mean, I'm curious.
But yeah, and one of the first things Scrooge does is look at them once they figure out, oh, you're the ghost of Christmas Past? Perhaps Scrooge could not have told anybody why if anyone could have asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap and begged him to be covered. So, I see a light, I immediately want to snuff it out.
Yep.
What? Exclaimed the ghost. Would you so soon put out with worldly hands the light I give? Is it not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap, and forced me through whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow? Which, it's never...
And we're going to pause for one moment.
And we're back.
Apologies for that. So you were saying, snuffing out the light.
Yeah, which it's never really fully explained what the Ghost of Christmas Past means by, you're one of the people who's basically made me have to carry this hat around and wear it for many, many years. But I'm guessing, just given the overall thrust of the novel, that it's mostly to do with greedy men make the world a dark place, so you make the past a darker place. In many respects.
I think it's a combination of that and greedy people run the world. Greedy, powerful people like Scrooge are generally the people in charge. They tend to be the people who have power. They are the ones who make rules. They are the ones who decide how systems are set up to their advantage and in ways that they can take advantage of others. And those are the kinds of people who are also most prone to abusing those systems because they've designed them to be able to be abused. So this spirit, who is the manifestation of history's desire for the goodwill of humankind, has had to essentially, metaphorically speaking, suffer through years of people like Scrooge making the world a worse place.
Yep, and Scrooge reverently disclaimed any and all intention to offend, or any knowledge of having willfully bonneted the spirit at any period of his life. So it's kind of just glossed over there. He makes a stupid comment, the ghost says, dude, what? And Scrooge immediately apologizes, which is rare for him, so, I mean, progress. But this is when we get to why the spirit is actually here beyond Marley sent me. And it's just, he made bold to inquire what business brought him there. Your welfare, said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, your reclamation, then. Take heed.
Yeah, Marley wants people to go to sleep, too.
Ironically, Marley in the book basically said, hey, I want you to sleep, except I'm going to have your night interrupted at, like, 1 in the morning. Multiple days. But, yeah. So, he takes Scrooge's hand, tells him to rise and walk with me. It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes, that bed was warm and the thermometer a long way below freezing, that he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing in a nightcap, and that he had a cold upon him at the time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. You are about to be yanked physically through time and space by Candle Doctor Who.
So the spirit takes Scrooge basically through the wall, into the air, and out into the past. And various depictions films and adaptations have done this in a lot of different ways throughout history of entertainment, cinema, etc. But the book doesn't spend a whole lot of time on it. It basically says they leave, and there's like a sensation and kind of a blurring of Scrooge's vision, and then he's in the past. Just that simple. Nothing flashy really about it.
Yep. And just, do you recognize this place? Yeah, I was born here. Like, I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. And we go down to his school where there are lots of people running around town, having fun, but they're moving toward the schoolhouse. For as the ghost says, the school is not quite deserted. A solitary child neglected by his friends is left there still. And it's interesting that this follows based on what comes before it. The jocund travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named them every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmases as they parted at crossroads and byways for their several homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas, what good had it ever done to him?
He has emotions, and he doesn't like it that he has emotions. And I'm only partially kidding. That really is the impression it gives, is that Scrooge has feelings about seeing these people that he hasn't seen in almost his entire life. And he's upset at himself for having those feelings.
Well, he just seems more surprised than upset because, like, not that many people are upset at the chance to be happy. Though I have heard stories about Queen Victoria that suggest she just liked being in mourning. I would have to verify those, but I have heard them.
It's not the weirdest rumor I've ever heard.
But yeah, we know that Scrooge knows the school is not deserted because, well, he's left alone there. Which is kind of the first indication we get that he did not have the best of childhoods. Because, well, really, up until this point, we've had no reason to suspect that there should be any circumstance that would make us feel sorry for Scrooge. The first section went out of its way to make sure that we know that Scrooge, kind of a jerk. Kind of a self-absorbed jerk who's just here to make life difficult for people.
So, Scrooge is here by himself, entertaining himself with reading, and he seems to have, at this age, been a fan of classic British, what would be today called young adult fiction. Of course, we tend to refer to it now as classic fiction. You've got the book there. What are some of the examples that it gives?
Arabian Nights, so I'm not sure where you're going with British fiction.
I think there was something else as Arabian Nights that I was thinking of. Wasn't there,
Robinson Crusoe.
Yes, that was it. But yes, Arabian Nights would have been a thing that would have been available at that time. Not written by a British person, but it would have been available among the British readership.
True. But yeah, and he's basically just reading by himself, and then his sister Fanny arrives to tell him that, I have come to bring you home, dear brother. To bring you home, home, home. Home for good and all, home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're to be a man, and are never to come back here, but first we're to be together all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, so Scrooge's father sent him off to a boarding school, and was at the very least considered to be a frightful and unkind person. Possibly abusive? Hard to say. But in the years since, he has changed, he has softened, and he has become a better person, and is now ready to bring Scrooge home to live as a proper family. Proper family in quotes there.
Yeah. And I would not discount, like, the whole abusive guardian thing, because it does come up in Dickens's work fairly frequently. I mean, it was a thing in David Copperfield. I don't remember the order in which things were published, but having a rough childhood to set you up for something better. Oliver Twist as well. He's an orphan, and the orphanage is not a great place, and then he ends up with Thieves Guild, and Oliver Twist is a thing. We know that. But
Yep.
They took the apricorns out of this game?
Yeah, you can just buy the balls straight from Kurt.
Ah. I'm not sure if I like that or not.
For our purposes, it's better, because we are not going to have days and days to gather up supplies.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But, yeah. And this is where we kind of maybe get some indication as to perhaps why he doesn't get along with his nephew very much. Because the ghost looks over his sister and says, "Always delicate creature whom a breath might have withered," said the ghost, "but she had a large heart." "So she had," said Scrooge. "You're right, I'll not gainsay it, spirit, God forbid." "She died a woman," said the ghost, "and had, as I think, children." "One child." "True. Your nephew." Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind and answered briefly, "Yes." So, given how fondly he reacted to seeing his sister back in this memory, it probably wouldn't be an impossible stretch of logic to make the interpretation that he doesn't get along with Freddy because he misses his sister when he sees him.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a big stretch considering how carefully Scrooge has gone out of his way to basically excise any sign of emotion from really his entire existence, but, you know.
Alright, we're gonna need to catch somebody to use Cut, because I don't have a Pokemon that can learn it right now. Anyway.
It looked like Past could.
Yeah, but I don't want to teach my teammates HMs if I don't have to.
But the Past really can cut like a knife if you're not careful.
Oh dear. And speaking of the past, the Ghost of Christmas Past moves the past forward a little bit following this. Scrooge and Fan depart and go off to the rest of their childhoods, and it jumps ahead to Scrooge's adolescence.
Rewind and Past forward. Yeah. They went in at the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again!"
Yep, Fezziwig! Scrooge's first, as far as we know, employer.
And there's a very, very long description given of just clearing out this little space, which not the biggest workplace ever. I don't know. I get the impression that Scrooge's building now is much bigger, but clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable packed off as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor swept and watered, the lamps trimmed, the fuel heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse as snug and warm and dry and bright as a ballroom, as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. So they bring in someone with a violin, and they just start dancing. Mr. Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig are stealing the show and just giving everyone a run for their money despite their age, and it's just a fun and happy and infectious joy. Just a good place to be. And yeah, Dickens spends a lot of time just describing all the goofy stuff going on and all the food there, and
Dickens really has a thing for describing food.
Well, Dickens, from what I remember, Dickens did not have the best of childhoods, family insolvency, and having to spend some time in the workhouse, so I can absolutely see why Dickens would find it rather important to dwell on something like that when he did not always have that in his own life.
Right.
And during the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick returned from them, that he remembered the ghost and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon his head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." "Small!" echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed him to listen to the two apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and when he had done so, said, "Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4, perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?" "It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. "It isn't that, spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. See that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." He felt the spirit's glance and stopped.
It's almost as if that was the point.
Yep. So Scrooge actually has a moment of self-awareness here. Yay! Progress is being made. And we can tell this because, what's the matter? Nothing in particular. Something, I think. No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all. And I actually wonder if just the ghost of Christmas past showing this to Scrooge might have been enough to at least make him a slightly better person. Because you don't get quite the same impact without the other two spirits, but you can definitely tell that Scrooge has been deeply affected by seeing this and has, without any prompting, hit the nail on the head as to how he himself is a terrible boss in comparison to the people he knew when he was a young apprentice in a maybe not quite Cratchit's identical position, but the same vague power dynamic of employer-employee.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that Scrooge saying this isn't much, and the ghost pointing out, well, the Scrooge saying, "What do you mean it's not very much?" Yes, 3 or 4 pounds. And Scrooge, we've mentioned before, eats gruel, which is typically of the poorhouses. Scrooge, the wealthiest man in town, won't buy anything like that for himself. Why would he ever spend even 1 pound on an employee when it doesn't have any direct benefit to him that he can see? Even though, we can see that, like, Scrooge and Dick, the other apprentice that is there, would have probably gone to war for Fezziwig because he took such good care of them. He did such nice things for them. He was just a fun and kind-hearted person to not just work for, but just to be around. People would look for Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig because they respect him, because they know he's a good person. They know he'll look out for them. They know he is just good. Mm-hmm. Scrooge does not have that. We have guide dogs who actively guide blind people away from him because they... You know what they say about dogs being able to sense character.
Mm-hmm. So then, following that scene, time moves forward again. Scrooge finds himself once again looking at another familiar face. But this time it's not an employer. It's a romantic partner. This is where we meet Belle. And you find out very quickly from the conversation between the two that's happening that she is Scrooge's fiancée.
Yep. And you get the impression that there's something else going on too, because he was not alone but sat by the side of a fair young girl in mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. So, we don't ever get any more information on that, but either Belle has decided to be supremely extra and dress up to mourn the loss of her relationship with Scrooge right before she breaks it off with him, or she's just suffered a loss in the family, which is probably more likely.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Definitely probably more likely that she's had a a loss in her own family, and has kind of taken the opportunity to reconsider her situation.
Yeah, because let's also see how they describe Scrooge here. Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. So we can just see, just in his movement, in his posture, in his face, Scrooge has changed since we last saw him with Fezziwig. So, and, well, Belle does just tell him, like, you've changed. It's like, it matters little, to you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? A golden one. And Scrooge takes great offense to this. This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on it which is so hard as poverty. There is nothing which professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth. It's like, he doesn't, like, look, poverty sucks. Poverty is awful. You don't want it to happen, but look, everywhere you turn, people yell at you if you try to avoid poverty when they're still going to yell at you for being poor. So Scrooge has taken the option of, well, fine then, let them hate me for gathering wealth. I don't want to be poor and dependent on strangers.
And this
Which,
probably,
you know, you can kind of understand, but...
Yeah, and this probably started with good intentions. He's probably thinking, I'm going to be married soon, I'm going to need to provide for a wife and possibly a family. I don't want to... I'll have to come back to that. I don't want to have to try to scrape by on the minimalist possible amount of money that I can get. I want to be able to survive and live comfortably and be happy. And then taking that to the worst possible conclusion, the most extreme possible level of, I'm going to just devote all of my time and attention and effort to work and to gathering money to the exclusion of my relationship.
Yep. And, well, you fear the world too much. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your noble aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not? Which... Belle basically just tries to tell him, like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to provide for a family, but you have let this fear replace everything I loved about you. You had all these ideas, you had all these hopes and dreams, and they have not been as important to you as just getting more money. How can I live with that? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy. Because, you know, idealism is for kids.
Yep.
Your own feeling tells you that you were not what you are, she returned. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words, no, never. In what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life. Another hope as its great end. In everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him. Tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?
And Scrooge doesn't have an answer.
Well, what Scrooge says instead of answering yes or no is, you don't think so. I would gladly think otherwise if I could. Heaven knows, when I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can I even believe that you would choose a dowerless girl, you who in your every confidence with her weigh everything by gain, or choosing her if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you. The full heart, for the love of him you once were. So yeah, Belle is poor. Belle does not have a dowry. She's just admitted that, and this is back in an era where, like, if you did not come from money, you had virtually no prospects for marriage, which, as we've mentioned, is probably why Scrooge was so worried about getting enough money to support the both of them. Because, well, if she's not going to bring anything in, he's going to have to make sure he can make that up.
Right.
And it seems like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. He got overboard with it and was more worried about earning the money than he was actually maintaining the relationship that the money would have been for. To the point where the woman he's trying to earn the money to support can see that he's not the same person. He's changed, he's no longer the man she fell in love with, and she doesn't want both of them to have a miserable life pretending what is gone is going to come back.
Yep.
I like how the skate worker acts as though you haven't had all of the wild Pokemon in the world sniffing at you.
She wants to make me smell even more attractive to them, apparently.
Here, have some butterfly pheromones. It'll be fine.
So that brings us to the final section of the Ghost of Christmas Past. One small step forward.
Which, first, Scrooge does beg, please, just take me back. I've seen enough. I don't want to see any more. Why do you like to torture me? One shadow more. No more, no more. I don't want you to see it. Show me no more. But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both arms and forced him to observe what happened next. And we see Belle again, for the last time. Specifically, we see Belle happily married with several children. Her husband comes in and lets her know, hey, I saw one of your old friends when I was out today. Oh? Was it Scrooge? It was. He was sitting alone in the world, not a friend with him in his counting house. I think his partner's on death's door. And Belle just kind of shrugs like, oh, okay. Like, there's no feeling really left there because she's had plenty of time to move on. And we know this was several years ago because they mentioned Marley not being dead yet.
Yep.
So Belle has well and truly moved on, even if Scrooge, a part of him, hasn't. And, well, he's not going to get the chance to fix that. It's in the past. It's over. It's done with. All he can do is try and pick up the pieces. If he has the courage to face the changes that need to be made. And, well, I think it goes far beyond a Christmas story and into just basic human behavior to say that it's kind of rare when people can.
Yeah, especially after that long to get set in their ways. Humans are creatures of habit. And habits are harder to break the longer you hold them.
And the longer you've been, in some way, rewarded for them. Scrooge had latched on very early, as we saw, to the world is cruel to poor people, therefore the most important thing is to not be poor. Therefore, I must gather all the wealth I can. And he's made a lot of money, so that could conceivably be a reward for it.
I mean, it got him exactly what he wanted out of it.
So to speak, though he is now discovering that maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be, because think of the things that made him happy as a child, as a journeyman apprentice, So, this is the first whammy from the other world, and it seems to have shaken him quite to the core.
Yep. As
he falls asleep.
And we will continue next time with the Ghost of Christmas Present. See you then.
Have fun!